McGraw-Hill Professional presents Life Without Ed. How One Woman Declared Independence from Her Eating Disorder and How You Can Too. 10th Anniversary Edition. Written by Jenni Schaefer with licensed clinical social worker Tom Rutledge. Narrated by Jenni Schaefer. As with the original edition of Life Without Ed, this book is still dedicated to my amazing mom and dad, Susan and Joe Schaefer. This book provides a variety of ideas and suggestions. It is sold with the understanding that the publisher and author are not rendering psychological, medical, or professional services. The author is not a doctor or psychologist, and the information in this book is the author's own opinion, unless otherwise stated. The information contained in this book is intended to provide helpful and informative material on eating disorders. It is not intended to serve as a replacement for professional medical or psychological advice. All medical, dietetic, or therapeutic recommendations mentioned in this book are not meant to be taken without the advice of a medical doctor, registered dietitian, and/or licensed therapist. To protect anonymity, the names of some of the people mentioned in this book have been changed, as have certain descriptive details. Also, to ensure privacy, some of the events and characters are composites of several individual events or persons. Foreword. As written by my former psychotherapist, Tom Rutledge, author of Embracing Fear. The first night I met Jenni Schaefer, she ripped a floor pillow to pieces. The cotton stuffing was everywhere, the fabric all over the group therapy room. And Jenni looked quite relieved. She was talking about her eating disorder and everything it had stolen from her. "What are you feeling right now?" I asked Jenni. "Mad," she answered simply. "Describe what mad feels like," I said. As Jenni searched for the right words, I noticed something more important than words. As she spoke, her hands clenched and unclenched like she was squeezing something in the air. "What do you feel in your hands?" I asked. "There seems to be a lot of energy there." Jenni paused as her concentration shifted to her hands that were now two tight fists. "Angry, very angry," she said. "What do your hands want to do?" "Rip something up." Jenni answered so quickly that she surprised even herself. A few minutes later, a perfectly good floor pillow had given its life so that Jenni might begin her journey to recovery. Jenni dove headfirst into the work of recovery from her eating disorder. My clients don't usually do something as courageous on their first night in group therapy as destroying part of the office decor. But that first night, Jenni was ready. Jenni was determined. Determination does not guarantee an excellent recovery. The road ahead of Jenni was not particularly smooth. She would stumble and fall on her face and on her butt many times along the way. But I could always see her determination. Jenni lost sight of it from time to time, but I never did. This young woman was committed to staying on the recovery path and not looking back. My work with Jenni has always been enjoyable. She made my job so much easier because she worked so hard. She was constantly taking notes during her sessions, but somehow her note-taking never distracted from the work. Although she described her notebook as her own personalized self-help book, the idea of writing a book about eating disorder recovery did not occur to her for some time. She was in Nashville to pursue her dream of performing and songwriting, after all. Now I know that those therapy notes have paid off, not just for Jenni, but for you too. You hold in your hands an extremely practical book. If you are struggling with an eating disorder, Life Without Ed can show you the way out. If you love someone with an eating disorder, Life Without Ed can help you make sense of what has previously been beyond comprehension. And if you are a mental health professional, Life Without Ed can take you inside the mind of a person with an eating disorder and teach you more than any research paper ever could about how to treat this insidious illness. Life Without Ed is like no other book about eating disorder recovery. It has two important features that are missing from most books on the subject. First, it is simultaneously hopeful and realistic. Because having an eating disorder is such a frustrating experience, major understatement. These two elements do not coexist easily. Jenni shares her experiences in ways that acknowledge the nuts and bolts difficulties of recovery while remaining the beam of hope that tells readers, by her example, if I can do this, so can you. And for those of you currently thinking that other people can recover from eating disorders, but you can't, I am here to tell you that Jenni Schaefer absolutely believed the very same thing not so very long ago. Beyond practical, realistic, and hopeful, Life Without Ed has another very important element that has been only hinted at in other eating disorder books: humor. In our all or none, black or white culture, humor about eating disorders has either not existed or it has been tasteless and abusive, implying that this is a condition brought on by extreme vanity, and that those who have eating disorders are shallow and vacant of real values. Nothing could be further from the truth. The people with eating disorders whom I have treated are some of the most intelligent, competent, creative, and hilarious people I have ever known. And they are anything but shallow in their reflections about themselves and the world around them. Toward establishing a middle ground with humor on this subject, Jenni's lessons and stories contain humor that neither minimizes the struggle, hers, yours, or anyone else's, nor ridicules or condemns. The humor of Life Without Ed comes from Jenni's perspective from having been there, in the trenches. And that's what humor in personal growth work is anyway, perspective that is born of experience. So I invite you to meet a remarkable young woman who will share with you secrets that many of you have thought, at least until now, were only your secrets. I encourage you to take advantage of the short sections in Life Without Ed. Read a little from here and there throughout the book, in no particular order. Identify with what Jenni has to say to you. Try some of the exercises, and make some notes in a journal of your own. But try not to put too much pressure on yourself. Take Life Without Ed a little at a time. Don't binge on it. Chew slowly and digest it in your own time frame. And certainly don't starve yourself of its wisdom. Don't add this book to your list of compulsions. Read it, reread it, rest, and come back to it. When you are feeling particularly courageous, talk to a friend about what you are learning about yourself. Enjoy, grow, and be kind to yourself along the way. Introduction. I have never been married, but I am happily divorced. Ed and I lived together for more than 20 years. He was abusive, controlling, and never once hesitated to tell me what he thought, how I was doing it wrong, and what I should be doing instead. I hated him, but I could not leave him. Ed convinced me that I needed him, and that without him I was worthless, nothing special, and worse. He told me that he was looking out for my best interest, that his way was for my own good, but he always turned on me. He made promises that he never kept. When I hit bottom physically and emotionally, I finally decided to divorce him. Let me tell you a little more about Ed. He is not a high school sweetheart. Ed is not some creep that I started dating in college, and Ed is not a guy that I met in the supermarket checkout line, although he does hang out a lot in grocery stores. Ed's name comes from the acronym ED, as in eating disorder. Ed is my eating disorder. You might recognize Ed as the little voice inside that says, "You just need to lose a few more pounds." Or, "Do you know how many calories are in that?" Ed is the one who stares back at you in the mirror and says that you should be dissatisfied with your appearance. Ed talks to all of us. While some of us are deeply embroiled in a relationship with him, others are just casually dating him. Maybe you are just meeting Ed for the first time. Whether you are married to Ed or just flirting with him, this book is for you. I broke free from Ed, my eating disorder, through a therapeutic approach I learned from psychotherapist Tom Rutledge. which involves thinking of the eating disorder as a distinct being with unique thoughts and a personality separate from my own. In one of my first therapy sessions with Tom, he pulled up an extra chair and asked me to talk to the chair as if it were my eating disorder. Tom ignored the "you must be nuts" look I gave him and continued. "If your eating disorder was sitting in this chair right now, what would you say to it?" Well, he was the professional. I was paying this man to help me, so I decided to give it a try. I looked at the chair and said, "Why do you try to control my every move? Why won't you just leave me alone?" In the few moments that it took me to ask those two questions, I felt a little separation from my eating disorder, and it felt so good. Throughout that therapy session, I continued this conversation with my eating disorder. By the end of the hour, I was referring to my eating disorder by a man's name, and for the first time, I had a feeling that I had just taken a significant step toward freedom. Unlike the way I felt leaving sessions with previous therapists and psychiatrists, I left Tom's office that day with a solid sense of hope. Experiencing just a little bit of separation from Ed in Tom's session proved to me that I could succeed in recovery. I had never before felt this separation while working with other people. In fact, I often left their sessions feeling hopeless and more entrenched with my eating disorder. I would spend the entire therapy session crying and talking about how frustrated I was with recovery. I was never directed toward positive steps to help fight my eating disorder. Sure, some of these healthcare professionals offered advice, but it tended to be unrealistic and did not address the real issue of the eating disorder. For instance, one psychiatrist insisted that my problems would be solved if I went back to college and earned a second degree in music business. He was sure that this would help me change my behaviors with food. In reality, researching colleges and talking to admissions counselors served only to stress me out and distracted me from fighting my eating disorder head-on. So you can imagine my relief when Tom showed me a therapeutic approach that actually enabled me to speak directly to my eating disorder. It felt amazing to finally be able to tell my eating disorder exactly what I thought about it. For just a moment, I was able to experience Jenni, someone I had not seen in a long time. Like many who use this approach, my eating disorder is male. Out of all of the people in my therapy group over the years, only one woman has referred to her eating disorder as female. She chose to call her eating disorder Edie. If your eating disorder is female, you might choose to replace Ed with Edie throughout this book. The important thing is to begin the separation. I use the word divorce to describe my separation from Ed because of an analogy that I learned in therapy that compares a woman's relationship with her eating disorder to an abusive marriage in which the wife is controlled and even physically beaten. Similar to a battered wife who is scared to leave her husband, a woman with an eating disorder is afraid to leave her illness behind. Often, it is all she has ever known. Women in abusive marriages frequently hide their bruises from friends and family in the same way that women with eating disorders hide their battle scars. These wives will begin healing only when they take the first step of deciding to divorce their abusers. And that is the only way that women with eating disorders can taste that same freedom in life. If you have never been married, you can think of this separation from Ed as breaking up with a significant other, or even severing ties with a best friend. Again, the important thing to remember is separation. In therapy, I learned that recovery is not about eliminating the eating disorder, but is about changing my relationship with it. The relationship I had with Ed completely changed through the course of our separation, in the same way that the relationship that a married couple has transforms through the process of a divorce. In order to change my relationship with Ed, I had to learn to stand back and separate myself from him. I had to make room for my own opinion, which created the opportunity for me to disagree with Ed. I realized that my food obsessions and my condemnation of my own body were coming from Ed, not me. To this day, recovery is about making room for the real me to exist. My first memories of Ed are from when I was only 4 years old. Ed would tease me in dance class and say that I was the largest girl in the room. He told me that my legs were fat because my thighs rubbed together in my leotard. When I was on stage, it did not matter whether or not I got the dance routine right. All that mattered was how thin I looked in my costume. I obsessed in elementary school when I was not allowed to stand in the front row in class photos, the row with the small, petite children. Ed explained, "You are in the middle row because you are fat. If you were skinny, you would be in the front row." Oddly enough, there is no photographic evidence that I was overweight. The pictures do prove that I was taller than those kids in the front row, but Ed never said that I was taller. He said plainly that I was fatter. Ed began restricting my food intake as a child by never letting me eat sweets, no Thanksgiving pie, no birthday cake, and no Halloween candy. During high school, Ed always forbade me to eat lunch. In show choir rehearsal, he made me stare into the wall-to-wall mirrors and analyze who was the thinnest girl in the group. Ed told me that if I wanted to be a successful singer, I would have to be thinner. In college, he restricted my food drastically. Eventually, he began forcing me to eat huge amounts of food. In order to stay thin, he convinced me to purge, which meant throwing up, fasting, or over-exercising. Ed loved this cycle of binging and purging. On a binge, it was not uncommon for me to drive from Taco Bell to McDonald's to Wendy's at 1 a.m., or even to eat cookies out of a trash can. Ed controlled my life. Separating from Ed was not an easy task. Throughout my recovery, I learned to ask myself repeatedly, is that what I think or what Ed thinks? My answer was usually Ed. I always knew what Ed thought, but had to really search to find out what was going on in Jenni's mind. Oddly, I realized that I knew Ed very well, but frequently felt as if I had never even met Jenni. Initially, I simply learned how to distinguish Ed's voice from mine. In the beginning, I agreed 100% with whatever Ed said. If he said I was fat, I agreed. If he said go to the store, I went. If he said eat until I tell you to stop, I did. Slowly, I began to disagree with Ed, but even in disagreement, I still obeyed his commands. In many ways, I felt weaker than ever. If Ed told me that I should not eat lunch, I knew that he was wrong, but I wouldn't eat lunch. Now, besides feeling weak, I felt like I was going crazy. I knew the right things to do, but didn't do them. I never thought of myself as someone who could be easily controlled, but that is exactly what was going on. As part of therapy, I kept a journal. I learned to write dialogue between Ed and me. To help you separate from your Ed, I will include dialogue throughout the book. Here's an example. Ed says, "I can't believe that you are going to eat lunch today." I say, "My friend is taking me out. I have no choice." Ed says, "When it comes to ordering from the menu, I'm in charge." I say, nodding my head, "Of course." Ed says, "We'll just play with your food and hide it under napkins." I say, "Okay." With persistence and an increasing determination fueled by my growing frustration, I finally began to disobey his commands. Here's another example of my dialogue with Ed. Ed says, "Jenni, I know you feel horrible. That awful, impending doom feeling will go away if you just walk to the vending machine and eat as much as you possibly can." I say, "That's not true. If I do what you say, I'll only end up feeling much worse." Ed says, "You'll feel relief. You'll feel calm. If you just binge, that terrible feeling will disappear just like it always does." I say, "If I listen to you, I will only feel a momentary numbness. Then I will feel guilty, ashamed, and angry, and I'll still feel awful." Ed says, "Stop trying to fight me. Just go to the snack machine and pick out some of your favorites." I say, "No, I think I'll pick up the phone instead and call someone for support who understands what I'm going through. I don't need you anymore." Writing out this dialogue, which can be so helpful in separating from Ed, has been included as one of Tom's therapeutic exercises, which you will find at the end of parts 1 through 6 of the book. Tom will make suggestions and share exercises that have been milestones in my recovery. I cannot guarantee that every activity in this book will help you, but I will say that each one was a significant step in my journey. Some of the exercises may seem silly at first, and Ed will tell you that they are all a waste of time. I encourage you to try even those exercises that seem ridiculous. Life without Ed includes only a bare minimum of exercises, so minimal that there is hardly any caloric content. Do not feel as if you have to complete all of the activities. On a second pass through the book, you may learn a lot from an activity that you did not find helpful the first time through. Take what is helpful and leave the rest. The format of this book is specifically designed for the individual who struggles with an eating disorder. When Ed and I were married, my thoughts were so consumed by food and weight that I found it hard to concentrate on anything else. Reading was especially challenging because of the difficulty in concentrating and the almost impossibility of my sitting still long enough to read. I often had to read the same page in a book over and over again. Taking into account the decreased concentration that you may experience, this book is divided into bite-sized, easily digestible portions. I have discovered that it is easier to stay focused on one short section as compared to a long chapter composed of page after page of text. Another reason for short sections is to accommodate your busy schedule. I know that you are busy because I know eating disorders are so time-consuming that there is little time left for anything else. If you are like me, you spend most of your time meeting Ed's demands. Short sections are beneficial in that they can be read quickly. In just moments, you will gain an amount of information that you can understand, remember, and apply to your life. And you can read a complete section before Ed has a chance to stop you. In addition to short sections, you will find humor throughout this book. Just because you might laugh does not mean that the topic addressed is not deadly serious. We are going to have fun along this journey, but there is nothing funny about what Ed will do to you. Humor has been an important element in my recovery, helping me to break away from my belief that I would never recover and providing me with a new perspective on my eating disorder. The ability to laugh at Ed gave me a feeling of power that enabled me to take charge of my life. Even though this book was designed especially for the person suffering with an eating disorder, Ed enjoys reading each and every page. Ed will read right along with you and try to make use of what he learns. Do you hear him now? As you read, listen for Ed's responses to the ideas within the book. Practice distinguishing Ed's responses from yours. You are not Ed. He will take from the book what he wants, but your job is to stay focused on what you need for your recovery, for your life. This may seem strange, but I am not going to try to explain eating disorders. When I first entered into recovery, I made the mistake of believing that I could think my eating disorder away. I read every book on the subject. I fell back on my BS in biochemistry and my interest in medicine as I tried to understand exactly why I had an eating disorder, how it had developed, and what specific chemical signals were misfiring in my brain. I thought that if I understood everything, I could think my way out of it. I was wrong. It came to a point when I finally had to stare Ed in the face and take action. In this book, I share my experience, strength, and hope that finally broke the chains that bound me to Ed. This book is about letting go, falling down, and getting back up again, and realizing that you are not alone. The reality is that millions of people across the globe suffer from eating disorders. While most individuals with eating disorders are female, males also struggle. I am inclined to believe that we don't have an accurate count of the true number of males who battle the illness. Years ago, alcoholism was mistakenly thought to be a man's disease, as women were suffering in silence. Comparably, I believe that many men have not yet come forward about having an eating disorder. You will see a lot of references to females throughout this book because my close-knit therapy group, which I mention frequently, has included all women. And of course, I am a woman. But this book is beneficial to both men and women. You may be anywhere on the continuum between thinking, I don't have an eating disorder, to, I am enthusiastic about recovering from my eating disorder. Eating disorders are characterized by denial. When I was at my very worst, people confronted me daily about my weight and asked me if I had anorexia. I considered this to be the greatest compliment. You may feel at two different places on this continuum within the same day or even hour. You are likely to experience resistance and mixed feelings. Regardless, I ask that you approach this book as open-mindedly as possible. Just because I have written about recovery does not mean that I am so far removed from my own eating disorder that I don't know what it feels like to have one. In fact, it is because I know exactly what it feels like that I wanted to write this book so badly. Eating disorders are about constant self-criticism, loss of self-esteem, and unrelenting perfectionism. I know what it feels like to be trapped inside all of these, completely surrounded by Ed. I know what it is like to feel pressured to be thin. I am currently pursuing a career in the music business, an industry with a very high physical standard. I turned down an acceptance to medical school to take a shot at being a recording artist. After college, I left everyone and everything that I knew back home in Texas and struck out on my own to Nashville, Music City, USA, to follow my dream, a dream that told me I had to have a perfect body. I gave up the chance of being a doctor to pursue a path with no guarantees, and I ended up face to face with my eating disorder. In Nashville, I found that most of the successful female singers were extremely thin. Ed told me that I had to be thinner. To this day, I still struggle with the idea that performers are supposed to be thinner than everyone else in the world. In my life, I have trusted Ed over and over again, always willing to give him another chance, only to discover that his solutions make me feel worse. I no longer trust him, and I have divorced him. But I do still have occasional slips. I am a work in progress, not perfect. I am grateful that I now understand perfection is not the goal. I know what it is like to have an eating disorder, and I know what it takes to get through it. In this book, due to my attempts to keep each story short, it may seem to you that recovery has been simple for me. In my effort to be concise, it may seem that I frequently overcame Ed in a matter of moments. For instance, in the first paragraph of a story, I may be in the pits of hell. Then by the third paragraph, everything is just wonderful and life couldn't be better. I assure you that my struggles with Ed have never been that easy. Although the second paragraph in the story may not be very long on paper, it symbolizes lots of hard work, sweat and tears, anger mixed with depression, hopelessness, a fair amount of resistance, and probably days of dedication to recovery. Separating from Ed was very challenging and seemed impossible at times. I just had to believe in myself and be willing to fall down over and over again. I had to find the strength to get back up every time. And Tom can verify that I fell down repeatedly. Sometimes it took days to get back up again. But the important thing is that I did eventually get up every time. Words on paper cannot adequately describe what it is really like to overcome an eating disorder. One must experience it to truly understand. No book or program is going to simply take away your eating disorder. To recover, you are going to have to eat, and you are going to have to stop binging and purging. And you are going to have to separate yourself from Ed and meet yourself all over again, or possibly for the first time. Recovery is about a new outlook on life. It is about little changes that lead to big changes, changes that...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?